The Industrial Revolution was a time of change and growth in both Britain and later America. Shortly after the French Revolution, when Napoleon Bonaparte was pushed out of power and Louis XVIII was king, rural societies became booming metropolitan areas. Prior to the 18th century, manufacturing was done primarily in homes, resulting in slow turnout of product. With the push of the Industrial Revolution, a shift to powered machinery, factories, and mass production occurred. The Industrial Revolution marked changes in manufacturing, communication, transportation, and banking. However, the most significant change was in the manufacturing industry and the development of factories, which brought forth an increased volume and variety of goods. The inventions of water and later steam-powered machinery led to the demand of factories to house the large machines that produced mass quantities of goods that allowed the economy in Britain to grow tremendously. The Industrial Revolution brought inventions forward that are still used today and allowed further development of popular machinery.
Hello, I'm Peter Weller, and welcome to the Grotus channel. The Industrial Revolution changed modern life with new inventions being created left and right. The creation of factories led to the development of urban areas and the creation of new jobs. However, the new jobs only led to horrendous living conditions and extremely low pay. I'm hearing from the first factory built by Richard Arkwright, which is located here in Cromford. He built this factory after he patented his water frame, which used water power to speed up the spinning of yarn to create fabric. The first factories were built near rapidly moving streams because they used the power of water to power their machines. Later on, when coal was used to heat water and create steam power, the factories moved more inward of the cities. The textile industry was the first industry to boom in Britain. After the French Revolution, the economy was low and the population was high. Goods were in high demand and there was no way to fill those needs without mass production. And the answer to that problem was to build machinery. The reason that factories came about was because they needed somewhere to house the large machines, and so everything could be produced in one building, increasing efficiency. The factory system didn't sit well with everyone. In the early 19th century, there was a group of English workers called Luddites that attacked factories and destroyed machinery as a means of protest. It was said to be led by a man named Ned Ludd.
When most people hear the words textile industry, usually cotton gin comes to mind. Eli Whitney is the creator of the coveted machine. It was the machine that separated cotton from its seeds. Though this machine wasn't used specifically to make fabric, it added efficiency to it because people did not need to separate the seeds by hand. More cotton could be produced and used.
It's pretty obvious that with a factory comes jobs, and with jobs come workers.
Each factory in this time employed roughly around 300 people. It was great that the factories created jobs, however the working conditions were horrendous and the pay was close to nothing. The average person worked 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and usually made only about 10 cents an hour. That was only $11 a week. Their work was often harder, as the more workers they had, the less money they got paid, so less people would work. They would get breaks only for lunch and dinner and had to live in slums because that's all that they could afford.
Factory work differed greatly from the farm work that most middle-class people were used to. This work wasn't seasonal, it was all year round. It was a harsh new way of life. It wasn't just the men that were employed. Women and even children, as soon as they were capable to, worked in factories, and the working conditions were horrible. It was scorching hot in the summer and bitterly cold in the winter. It was always dark, which led to several injuries. There was no safety precautions. Girls' hair would get tangled in machinery. Limbs were cut off, and fatality was common.
A lot of people underestimate what the importance of women was during this time. But if it weren't for women, factories wouldn't have been as successful as they were. Women made up the entire working facility of several factories.
Workers were constantly breathing in lint-filled air and coal dust, which damaged the lungs and led to illnesses. When workers were sick or injured, that meant their work wasn't getting done, so replacements were quick to be made. With so many people needing jobs, they weren't very hard to find.
With factories being built to draw people into cities, there was an even larger increase in population growth that had a negative impact on the people. There was so much overcrowding that many people lived in one small apartment. 5 to 9 people lived in a single room, resulting in the rapid spread of diseases. Due to the lack of medicine and medical care, many deaths occurred.
Sadly, these deaths were almost always children.
Children were the biggest victims of the factory boom. The need for workers was such a high demand, however, factories could not afford to hire men who demanded to be paid too high of wages. This led the factories to recruit women and even more often children for work because they could pay them lower wages for the same amount of work, and they were easily replaceable. Children were commonly used to crawl under machinery or into small areas to fix machines that were broken. A lot of the children were in orphanages, so they were more easily recruited for work.
Women were also hired because they could be paid less, but they actually took a lot of pride in their work. They were so used to staying at home and taking care of the families, so when they got the opportunity to go out and work for a wage, they did. They really felt a sense of independence when working in factories. They were mainly employed in textile factories and piece workshops.
Women were inferior to men. Men would be in charge, and if the women workers chose not to listen, men would abuse the women as far as rape. Women were not treated equally.
That many injuries and deaths occurred due to entailments with machines. However, fires were another main concern because of poor ventilation and no safety precautions. There were no windows and no way to escape if a fire was to happen. When the Industrial Revolution spread to America, many working conditions were even worse. Fires happened in Britain, but nothing as bad as the infamous Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire really changed the lives of factory workers. Nearly all the workers were teenage girls who did not speak English, working 12 hours a day every day. On March 25, 1911, at approximately 4:30, the cry of fire was heard from the 8th floor. The linens that littered the floor quickly engulfed in flames, and as people rushed for the one fire escape in the building, the stairway was so narrow it would have taken hours for all of the workers to escape. And with only one working elevator, it would have been impossible for there to be no deaths. Had proper evacuation been able to happen, almost all of the deaths would have been prevented.
Many girls tried to evacuate through a stairwell. However, when they came to 2 doors, one was locked and the other only opened inward, so they burned. Women could be seen jumping from windows, and all of this happened in 15 minutes. This tragedy proved one major con of the factory system, that factory owners were negligent of the safety of their workers.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire brought major attention to the working conditions in factories. Laws requiring automatic sprinklers, adequate fire escapes, and lowered working wages for children were put into place. Though this all happened in America, these reforms spread worldwide, and especially to Britain, where the abundance of factories was even larger. This also contributed to the formation of labor unions, where workers were demanded better treatment.
Yes, the factory system was very corrupt. It created incredible hardships for the workers. However, there were still many pros that came along with the obvious cons. For example, factories allowed for the production of mass quantities of necessary goods. Factories allowed production to be faster and more efficient because everything was constructed in one building. The factory system created many jobs and helped promote the growth of cities. The economy in these cities greatly increased because there was a lot more output of products. Factories and manufacturing brought immigrants from Britain and America together.
From across the pond, the factory system looked like all was well. However, it is very clear that it was extremely corrupt from the inside. These workers were often school-aged children with no education because they were forced to work to help support their family. They would work extremely long shifts, up to 16 hours a day. Working conditions were so horrendous that if one wasn't injured due to malfunction with machinery, they were probably sick from inhaling dust and other harmful debris. If a mere 9-year-old were to be injured, there was no sympathy. They were fired and a replacement was found, leaving their family with one less small income. If someone didn't work fast enough, they were abused until they learned to be quicker. It's the poor treatment of these workers that made them feel as if they were slaves.
I'm Peter Weller from the Grotus Channel. Thanks for watching.